Hello and welcome to an update. It's the 7th and we all watched the unfolding of last night, and a huge number of people have thought what went wrong or what's going on, trying to make head and tail understand of it. So many claims and counterclaims, and of course the human consciousness becomes somewhat destabilized. Well, let's talk it through. First of all, the vast majority of people who did go on that demonstration were Trump supporters and were very, very clear in their intention to show their solidarity for the Republic and the President. And what happened was that, not unsurprisingly, a number of Antifa dressed up as Trump supporters. There was a secret deal between the police and security guards in the Capitol building. Remember, who very much a part of the mayor, task force, if you like. Very small police presence, and of course these Antifa people were let in. They were dressed as Trump supporters. They, in a very staged, managed way, entered the chamber. I don't believe most of the lawmakers actually were in on this. They just ran. They got a very realistic reaction from them. Some of them would know what's going on, but I think many of them didn't. And so the cameras, which just happened to be in the right position at the right time, of course, for the established media, took the right sort of pictures to forward or further the deep state's vision. So what we had last night was a 250 strong Antifa group, funded by some rich billionaire somewhere, who did a theatrical stage managed operation specifically for the media. And we know this is a fact because Biden, who is incapable of stringing two words together, suddenly had this amazing speech blaming Trump and blaming people and this, that and the other, which supposedly he'd written with 5 minutes to spare on the back of a deck of cards packet. And obviously it was days in the planning. All right, so let's be clear, that is what happened. But if we just left it at that, then we would be wondering what the good guys were doing. So I need to tell you what the good guys were doing. While everybody's attention was on Washington, D.C., there was activity taking place in 7 other cities. So the bad guys were fully focused on DC, and that was obvious from the level of planning. I can tell you that 7 other cities, activity from the good guys was taking place while the eyes of the world were on DC. Now, another question is, well, if we all know about Dominion and we know how they were going to trick it, why on earth did the good guys let the runoff elections in Georgia take place only to be cheated again? And it's a legitimate question and people can't understand it, and I want to answer that for you. On Christmas Day, 25th of December, American intelligence, the good guys, not the bad guys, American intelligence received irrefutable evidence that the Italian government had a few satellites which were ostensibly run by the Italian government and the Italian military, but were really leased or given to the Vatican. Now, the Vatican named these satellites after Leonardo da Vinci. So these satellites are not spy satellites, they are encryption communication satellites. And for all intents and purposes, they come under the secret military of the Italian government, but they are totally controlled by the Vatican. When it was realized that it was the Vatican who was behind all of the main players and of the election fraud, the game had to change. The problem is, you see, with Russia's a foreign country. It's not a problem to take action against Russia. But Italy is a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's a member of NATO. It's a member of the European bloc within the United Nations. I know China's in the UN, but it's not the European bloc. So what the military was saying is, hold on a minute. Not only do we have to deal with SCOTUS, that's nearly totally corrupt. Not only do we have to deal with the FBI, not only do we have to deal with the CIA, or the mainstream media, or these states that are clearly non-democratic in terms of democracy. Not only do we have to deal with the big tech, not only do we have to deal with individuals with a great deal of wealth, but you're now telling us that we might have to deal with a foreign country that, in the eyes of the world, is a key ally of the United States and is a member nation within NATO. So that information caused a bit of a problem because it suddenly meant the game had completely changed. So that's one of the reasons that martial law was not called last night, because there had to be a secondary plan worked up how we'd deal with Italy and what could occur there. Now then, let's talk about Georgia. What the good guys had was all the information that the Kraken team had captured. Firstly, from Frankfurt. Secondly, a little bit from South America, a little bit from Canada, but mainly from electronic intercepts. But what they didn't have was the understanding of how this information, this vote rigging, this vote fakery, this trickery, how was it done electronically? Where on earth was it going, and how was it going there? So they looked at all the VPN lines. They looked at domestic satellite dishes, news broadcasters, trying to understand how the information in real time was sent from these different Dominion machines, linked to China, linked to other countries, and in real time changing the algorithm. How was it done? And they didn't know. And then on Christmas Day, they found out it was done through the Leonardi satellites, which are run by the Italian government, but in truth are owned and manipulated by the Vatican. So they understood now, the good guys understood how this information was actually being passed in real time. What they didn't have, though, was a final piece of the puzzle. Now, if people are saying, well, they never spoke about that, we didn't know about that, we thought they had everything. Well, they weren't going to tell the world that they were actually missing a vital piece of information. And they knew that the runoff in Georgia could be swamped with soldiers, and they would never get that piece of information. And so what they deemed was that, well, let it run. It'll be a fake election, but we will get the final piece of the jigsaw. And frankly, they think it doesn't matter because we're going to take action. And so whether these two Democrats are sworn in, if they are, they're only going to be in for a few days, and we're going to, take action. It doesn't just mean resitting the president, it means looking at the Senate, looking at the Congress, the lower house, and actually looking at what the real results were, and then, doing that. So what happened was they let the bad guys go ahead with the fakery on the runoffs in Georgia, and the military teams, and if you listen to my earlier talks, I've told you where these teams were based. And the bad guys know about these teams because this is the same base or two bases and teams that were used in 2016. They have more mobile units now than they did, but the same bases are there. So what happened was they gained the information that they'd been looking for, a vital piece of information which changes everything. Now, I'm not a technical expert, but I can tell you that they now have a complete puzzle laid out in front of them. They have every piece of the jigsaw laid out in front of them. What I'll further say to you is there are around about 2 weeks left before the 20th. And there's lots of stories of Pence doing this and Trump doing that. If you heard the president's speech, he said, I'm not giving in. I'm not going to give in. He knows, as you know and I know, that it wasn't election fraud, it was election official fraud, which means on a massive scale, which we can now run up to the Vatican. That's how high. We've always known names like Obama or Clinton, that's nothing new in that. But this is the first time, to my knowledge, that we've brought in the Vatican as a key player in trying to swing this election. And so all the pieces of the puzzle are in. And there are just around under 2 weeks before the 20th. I can tell you it's not over. The US military had to recalibrate on the information of Italy. And behind the scenes, there are important calls taking place, how the Italian government can save its neck. Because what they've been involved in is nothing short of treason, nothing short of trying to remove an elected politician, a head of government, no less, of a foreign government. Unheard of from that way. Perfectly normal for the United States to try to remove a head in South America somewhere, been going on for years. But for a member of NATO to attack another member of NATO, unheard of. And so this presented a massive diplomatic and quasi-military situation for the United States. I think all the pieces of the puzzle are in place. I think that we should start to see some very interesting developments on behalf of the good side in these days that run up to the 20th. So Antifa stole the show, but what they actually did was they convinced the United States military that the situation cannot be repaired through the courts. It cannot be repaired through democracy. It can only be repaired with a nice big brush to come in and sweep it out. The alternative is, well, they say it doesn't bear thinking about, but I think we do need to think about it. People do need to understand it. The alternative is the end of America as written in the history books. It's the end of it. And there are an awful lot of people who are good people in positions of authority who have not allowed themselves to be corrupted, who understand the vital importance of the next 15 or so days. They understand what's at stake here. And so whilst the world's attention was taken on Washington, D.C., other activities were taking place around the United States, and all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle are now in place. So what I would hope is that on alternative media, some of these interesting bits that I am now saying will become, over the next few days, released. I won't be releasing it, I'll let others do that. That will be released. People will then understand why the Georgia runoffs had to be left to run and fail, what was gained, and how that's going to be used as the game-changing piece in the days ahead. So there's not a time for panic. Funnily enough, this could be the 10 days of darkness that so many people talk about, not power cuts or outages or an amazing eclipse of the sun and we're all frozen to death, but maybe a few days where it looks like the good guys have lost and the bad guys have won. Maybe that's the testing time for everyone. And people will say to me, what should I do? What should I do? Well, you can go and meditate, but you could pray to Source, God, whatever label you want to put on the great creator, and you could pray for Donald Trump. And if you're not a Trump supporter, that's fine. Why don't you just pray for the Republic? Why don't you just pray for democracy, for everything that you, whatever it might be, you believe in? So prayers are valuable. I know meditation's valuable, but sometimes prayers to the source, to the creator, are very valuable. And if you remember that film, It's a Wonderful Life, with James Stewart in it, and you think about that, and that's not unlike the situation that the United States and indeed the world is in at the moment, and that tipping point. Do you remember when James Stewart is the building and loans manager, is standing at the bridge and he's contemplating jumping in? Can you remember that film? And what's amazing is just how many good people there were in the town who actually, when push came to shove, weren't all corrupted, weren't all evil, and would come to support the good side. So, not a time for panic, not a time to get a wobble on. Let's just wait and see. The fingernails are not bitten down yet. I do understand that the revelation, and I'm using that word deliberately, of the Italian Vatican role in the corrupt election was a shock to everybody, and that has taken time not to come to terms with. Can come to terms with that in seconds. It's taken time to work out how you manage that. It's one thing to have a dirty house and to clean your dirty house. It's quite another thing if there's another dirty house that's trying to involve, and you then are having to deal outside of the family. And that's in effect what happens with Italy. It's something now that it could bring the Italian government down. It should bring the government down, but politics is a strange thing. But what I'm saying to you is that this is not the time to give up. It's not the time to lose hope. This is the dark moment before the dawn. And as long as, and those of you who remember, I hope you do, one of the first podcasts I did after November the 3rd, if you get any time in your life, you might try and find it. I'll try and do my words quote for quote. I said something like, if the people who put President Trump into office stand by him, Trump will be re-elected. If the people who put him in office decide that they don't want to do it, he won't. And that's why I relate back to that It's a Wonderful Life, because at the end of the film, all the people who the building and loans manager had helped in his hour of need, they all came in. Do you remember the film? And they all put a few bucks in the hat. They came and helped him. So that's my analogy here, that the people who put Trump into that position, as long as they stay with him, he will re-sit for 4 years. And I said that just after November the 3rd. And so that weeks, months later, is now playing out. So we're talking about the United States military. Of course we are. And as long as they stick to what they said they would do, Trump will be back in. You need a massive clear out in the two houses. You need a massive clear out in some arms of American intelligence. You need a massive clear out in the judiciary and legal system. You need a massive clear out in many of the states, not all of them. Look how good Texas was. But in many of the states, you need a big clear out. You need a very big clear out in mainstream media. You need a big clear out in those individual billionaires, trillionaires who decided they would leave the world of business and become involved in the world of politics without being elected. So no held accountable by anybody. They would themselves start to play the game of Lord and Master. They need to be sorted out. It's so much. And rather than bite your fingernails and get worried, think about how wonderful President Trump has been, in the sense that all of those agencies, all of those organizations have conspired against him. And yet there he is. And we know it's true, because those of you who watched his speech for the first time saw him behind bullet-resistant glass. So for the first time, didn't have it in the rallies I ever saw, but now he was behind bullet-resistant glass, which tells us that they knew there would be, if possible, very overt attempts to shoot him and kill him in front of all of the hundreds of thousands of people. So that is the game that's being played, and these people, the good guys, know what's coming, and they are playing a game at a level, and it might seem that the bad guys are winning. And what I would say to you is that they're very good at presenting the image to the public. They're very good at presenting that media image. But what they're not so good at, and the good guys are better, is thinking ahead. That's the point. The good guys are thinking ahead more moves in the game of checkers than the bad guys. So while the bad guys' attention and the world's media was focused on DC, other things were taking place. So be calm, watch it play out. Let's look for these interesting bits of information which are game changers to be released. Let's see what the good guys do with that. All right, speak to you very soon. Take care. God bless.